Hi, I'm Phil, and in these story analysis videos, I take a look at a film in terms of its story structure, character arcs and themes from the point of view of a screenwriter and filmmaker. Today, we're looking at The Blues Brothers. The Blues Brothers was written by Dan Aykroyd and John Landis, directed by John Landis. It was the first film, actually, that Dan Aykroyd had ever written, the first screenplay. And he notoriously wrote an incredibly long 325-page or something screenplay that didn't follow the usual screenplay format. He didn't know how to write an actual screenplay. John Landis then came in and shortened it, got it down to a reasonable 2.5 hours, and presumably gave it more structure and made it look like a proper screenplay. Many of you watching this video will know the backstory, but for those who don't, Dan Aykroyd and John Belushi came from Saturday Night Live. They were two of the stars of that show, and they had created these characters of Jake and Elwood Blues on Saturday Night Live. And they had already released an album as the Blues Brothers called A Briefcase Full of Blues. And also John Belushi had recently starred in a hit film, Animal House, also directed by John Landis. And they had both starred in the yet-to-be-released Steven Spielberg movie, 1941. Spielberg's first big failure after having so many hits.
If it turns out not to be a funny movie, I'll change the campaign and call it an action-adventure. I'll cut out the word comedy.
In terms of story structure, there's not much there, admittedly. It does kind of follow a 3-act structure, but it doesn't really have a classic A plot and B plot. Now, the A plot being the main action of the story, the things that take place. In this case, it is quite simply, Jake is released from prison, from Joliet. They go to visit the Penguin.
Oh, Jesus Christ! Jesus Christ!
And are given a mission.
They're going to sell this place to the Board of Education, and I'll be out on the street.
To find $5,000.
That money's got to be in the Cook County Assessor's office within 11 days.
That is our inciting incident. First act turning point comes very shortly after when Jake has his epiphany at the church.
The band!
Do you see the light?
The band!
The epiphany being, of course, get the band back together. That now becomes the mission.
We're on a mission from God.
That will solve the greater problem of how do we get the money to pay off the tax bill. The midpoint of the story is when the band actually is reunited. So the first half of Act 2 is them going out, finding the guys, and convincing them to come back and rejoin the band.
We're putting the band back together.
Forget it. No way.
We're on a mission from God.
The second half of Act 2 is them doing their first gig at Bob's Country Bunker. This is the shit gets real midpoint moment. And the second act's turning point, which is usually the all is lost moment in most other films, becomes the all is won moment in this. This is where they do the big concert. And they get the record deal and they make the money.
Here's $10,000 in advance on your first recording session.
Act 3 is entirely the massive chase as they try to deliver the money before the deadline. That's the A plot, very simply. They're on a mission from God.
We're on a mission from God.
And the way they're going to solve the problem is get the band back together and raise the money somehow. The B plot of any film is usually the relationship, which means what is the growth arc for the central character, which expresses the theme of the film. This one, we don't have that. In this case, the central relationship is between the brothers, Jake and Elwood. These are what we would call iconic characters, not just because they're iconic characters in terms of celebrity, but because they are characters who do not need to grow and change. They don't really have a growth arc. Now, there are some minor conflicts between the two brothers.
I took the liberty of bullshitting you, okay? You lied to me. It wasn't lies, it was just bullshit.
But this is just normal sibling rivalry. There's no real crisis. There's no real conflict between them. They are working together to fulfill this mission. So there is no real arc for them. And the other relationships in the story, the mystery girl played by Carrie Fisher, the relationship with the Cab Calloway character,
Curtis, you and the Penguin are the only family we got.
or with any of the other characters in the film, even the rest of the band, none of them really amount to much in terms of relationship development arc. It's not a character-driven story in that sense. The theme of the film, therefore, to the extent that we have one, is loyalty to family. loyalty to the Penguin and Curtis,
$5 grand, no problem. We'll have it for you in the morning.
and loyalty to the band.
The reason he got locked in the slam in the first place was for sticking up a gas station to cover you guys.
And for the band, loyalty to the brothers.
But babes, this is Jake and Elwood, the Blues Brothers.
The Blues Brothers? Shit.
An extension of that loyalty theme is musicians deserve to be paid.
Bob, about our money for tonight.
That's right. $200, and you boys drank $300 worth of beer.
We figured, beer was like complimentary for the band,
Oh, no.
And anyone who helps them, like Ray, deserves to be paid.
And as usual, I got to take an IOU.
Take $1,400 and give it to Ray's Music Exchange in Calumet City. Give the rest to the band.
You got it.
And the whole film is largely a series of sketches and a reason to showcase several soul, blues and R&B performers. Plus, massive action set-piece sequences.
Baby clothes. This place has got everything.
Now, I write musicals, and I know movie musicals very well. This is a movie musical, but not in the traditional sense of it being written as a book musical, like one designed for Broadway or West End. It's more than anything a jukebox musical. It's written around pre-existing songs. There's two main problems when you're writing a movie musical, and they're both related. The first is, how do we get into and out of the songs that is seamless and makes sense within the world of our story? And the second is, we don't want the songs to stop the story from moving forward. They should be integrated into the story in some way. This goes way back to Oscar Hammerstein and Showboat and the Rodgers and Hammerstein musicals, where he basically invented the idea of a book musical where the songs become integral to the story in some way. They're not just, let's stop everything and have a song and a dance, and then in 3 or 4 minutes we'll get back to the story. And this is the big problem with what are usually called jukebox musicals. How do we make the songs work within the context of the story? Or do we just stop everything and have a song? The Blues Brothers treads a fine line here. One way it solves the first issue of getting into and out of the songs credibly was something that Bob Fosse kind of invented with Cabaret. All the songs are diegetic, which means they happen in the context of the performers actually performing them. They're on a stage. It makes sense that the people are singing in this moment. So in the case of the Blues Brothers, the first few songs we hear are literally diegetic music. They're being played on the radio or on the 8-track in the car. And they do become score and soundtrack to the movie, but they're in the context of being played on the car speaker system. Likewise, the Peter Gunn theme becomes soundtrack. It's score, it's non-diegetic, it's not actually in the world. Although I love this moment when the music stops. And then starts again. The James Brown song at the church, that's diegetic. They're performing a song. It's a revivalist gospel church. And yeah, it's a big production number with some great dancers, but it works in the context of that's how some churches actually work in America. This is where gospel music comes from, after all. The only time they break that rule is with the Aretha Franklin song Think in the Soul Food Cafe, where she just breaks into song. And we don't know, and apart from the saxophone player, we don't know where the rest of the band is. And they just sing. This is classic musical theatre. But by then, we know how this movie works. We understand the comic book nature of the film. So those are the two ways of getting songs into especially a movie musical. It's either diegetic and there are performers performing, or they just break into song. When you do that, as they did with Think, it's very hard to get out of the song unless the scene ends on that beat. That's the one awkward moment in the movie, I think, when Aretha Franklin stops singing, because the scene doesn't end with her challenge. It has to end with Matt Guitar Murphy and Blue Lou making the choice to leave with the Blues Brothers. And while John Landis tries to portray this awkward silence as tense, it just becomes drawn out. It's an anticlimax.
Let's boogie.
But then there are other moments like the John Lee Hooker song, which again is diegetic. They're busking, they're playing in the street, and that's the scene. And there's no plot happening beyond the fact that Jake and Elwood are arriving. So there are moments in the Blues Brothers where the songs don't move the story forward a lot, like when they're playing at Bob's Country Bunker. This lengthy sequence doesn't actually serve story very much, aside from the fact that they're doing their first gig and have to adapt on the spot, coming up with Rawhide.
That ain't no Hank Williams song.
But it does eventually serve as an obstacle.
The next gig is gonna be dynamite. Huge. You'll see.
And possibly the end of the band.
I say we give the Blues Brothers just one more chance.
Likewise with the concert at the end. There are moments of plot where Jake and Elwood see the police watching them and they call that out.
Look there, brother, baby, and I'll see what I see. Baby, don't you wanna go?
But those two songs, as well as Minnie the Moocher from Cab Calloway, are largely there to see them fulfill their promise of putting on a great show. So you can stop the story for moments like this, as long as they don't go on for too long, and as long as the performance is great. In a movie, it's hard to get away with that. You can pause the story for 2 to 3 minutes. But beyond that, we start to lose interest. Story is most important in a film, even more so than in a stage musical. You'll also notice that after the big concert, which is their second act turning point, once they've got the money, and once they've escaped both the police and Carrie Fisher's character.
Good to see you, sweetheart.
You contemptible pig.
The entire third act is the massive chase and them desperately trying to get to the Cook County assessor before the deadline, before they closed for business on that day.
Use of unnecessary violence in the apprehension of the Blues Brothers has been approved.
That's the entire third act, and you'll notice that there are no songs in the third act at all. This often happens in musicals, even stage musicals, where the third act of the story, the music takes a back seat, and we focus on plot. We focus on resolving whatever the threads of the plot and the character arcs are. Once they've delivered the money to Steven Spielberg,
And here is your receipt.
and they're under arrest, end of story. But they've fulfilled their mission. The denouement is then the jailhouse scene.
Let's rock. Everybody, let's rock.
One thing the film does really well, in fact, is the A-plot is very simple. As I said, they've got to get the money for the Penguin. They decide to reform the band as a way to do that. They succeed in doing that. They deliver the money. That's basically it, the A-plot. You need to add lots of complications and obstacles along the way. Many of those obstacles are the police, and then the good old boys, and then the Illinois Nazis, and the ex-girlfriend. And so all of these things that are getting in the way, the car breaking down, and this gag, in fact, when they finally arrive, with the car falling apart, that one comes from Buster Keaton. And this sequence in the chase comes straight out of The French Connection. And again, for those who don't know, Cab Calloway, who plays Curtis, who performs Minnie the Moocher, that was, of course, Cab Calloway's big hit back in the 30s. This is early R&B jazz. So the Blues Brothers works despite the fact it doesn't really have a strong B-plot or character arc. It doesn't have a clear theme or lesson for our central characters to learn, and it has a very slight A-plot. One of the things that makes it work, apart from the fact that the music is great and really well performed, obviously, and the action sequences are really well done, but one of the things that makes it work really well is that there's a ticking clock. There's a deadline. They must find the money and fulfill their mission from God in a matter of days.
That money's got to be in the Cook County Assessor's office within 11 days.
And that line was clearly added in post in ADR. That ticking clock sometimes is all you need to give momentum to the story. Now, this obviously is an unrealistic film, especially when we get to the third act and the resolution with the Illinois Nazis, where they drive off the unfinished motorway. This obviously is unrealistic, but we've set this up at the beginning, with the old Dodge, the police car, being somehow a magical vehicle.
The car's got a lot of pickup.
And the fact that they don't get killed, despite all of Carrie Fisher's many attempts, is cartoon, obviously. Something else they do that keeps us interested and keeps the plot moving forward is that every now and then we are told what the stakes are. We are told what they have to do next and what's going on. We're reminded what the story is.
We put the band back together, we do a few gigs, we get some bread, bang! $5,000.
Hey, man, don't worry. We got a couple of days. We'll get the Penguins' tax money.
A lot of young children are dependent on it.
Young children? Why? What do you mean?
Jake and Elwood are donating the band share of the door money to pay the taxes on the St. Helens orphanage in Calumet City.
What?
This is very on the nose, it's very expositional, but it explains very clearly what's going on and sets up what's about to happen. Again, for a comedy, for a magical comic book style comedy, that's fine. It works. It explains things very clearly. And you'll find this in a lot of action films, in fact, when people are explaining what they're going to do, what the plan is, or why they're behaving the way they are. They set things up very obviously.
It's 106 miles to Chicago. We got a full tank of gas, half a pack of cigarettes. It's dark, and we're wearing sunglasses. Hit it.
And the band, of course, these are all real musicians. They were, in fact, some of them were actually part of Stax Records and actually played on some of the songs that we hear in the music from Stax. And Booker T and the MGs, they were half of that band, Green Onions. And the horn section comes from Blood, Sweat and Tears. So that's my take on the Blues Brothers. If you like these kinds of story analysis videos, you know what to do. If you'd like to learn more about filmmaking, check out my book linked below. It is expensive, but if you're serious about the craft, it's well worth the money. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.
Twist it, shake it, shake it.